Welcome to Exploring Translation with 1,000 Languages. I'm Jackie Balderrama, the project manager, and will be moderating tonight's event. I'd like to thank Claire Marchant-Collier for the invitation to collaborate on this event, and Liminal for providing this wonderful space. We really appreciate it. As an introduction, 1,000 Languages Project is a living database featuring translations of work from the graduate-run literary journal Hayden's Fair Review, translated into manifold world languages. We're a Virginia G. Piper Center initiative on ASU campus, and our mission is to increase accessibility to literature, promote cultural exchange, and connect people across disciplines, communities, and the world through a living database of translations. Translations from English into chosen languages, sorry, I'm a little small for this, into chosen languages are completed primarily by ASU student interns who work on one longer or several short pieces over the course of the semester. We also run a community engagement activities, one of which you'll be hearing about tonight, with the Landscapes of Language community poem. Visit 1000languages.asu.edu to see our first two issues representing translations in Chinese, Greek, Romanian, Turkish, Spanish, and Urdu. I'm thrilled to welcome some of 1,000 Languages' current and past interns who will be presenting on their relationship to language, translation, or their work with the project. We'll have 4 presentations, after which I'll start off our Q&A and then open it up to the audience. So we'll start off first with Chris Hoshnic. Chris Hoshnic is an Arizona State University English student and special projects intern for the 1,000 Languages Project. Chris has written, directed, and produced 3 short films and 1 feature film. His short film, Ozzy, was accepted into the Jerome International Film Festival, where it had its world premiere. He has also written several screenplays, 2 of which placed in the finals of several screenplay competitions. Please join me in welcoming Chris.
Oh, this close? Okay. Hi, my name is Chris. I'm gonna get taller. We good? Okay. So my name is Chris. I'm a 1,000 Languages Project intern at ASU. And I just wanted to first thank everybody for coming out for the Explore Languages panel. I want to thank Jackie. She's kind of our go-to for this whole thing that we put together. But what I wanted to share with you is kind of what I deemed was important for the Northern Arizona Book Festival and their themes to landscapes of the Northern Arizona, the Colorado Plateau, and the American Southwest. Now, I just want to kind of share with you kind of my story a little bit. So I grew up on the Navajo Reservation, and on the reservation there is a community of culture and language. And now I was very lucky to have grown up as a part of that community. And it wasn't until I grew up a little bit older that I realized that not everybody, the kid down the street versus me, you know, they did not get the same opportunities that I had to have with my family. In my family, we had a family preservation of a thing we call oral teaching, which is through language we learned our culture, and through language we learned ceremonial practices. And I grew up understanding this through our language, and through that Navajo lens, if you will. And through that lens, I learned that the land is a sacred space. You know, we live on it, we eat on it. We reside on it, and by understanding that we do not own the land, I think that's the type of relationship that I personally have with the land that we live on. And so with the project that I was working on with the 1,000 Languages, I wanted people to think and feel and see the land that we live on the same way. And so what I also wanted to do was create the Landscapes of Language, which is a multilingual poem made solely by words and phrases submitted by participants describing their relationship to the land that they reside on. And so the idea was to make the poem accessible. And so we created a simple prompt. What is your relationship to the land that you live on? And so then we had the participants of all ages and language abilities to describe something that, that displays the cognitive use of words. And so understanding that the words or phrases that they use in one language may not completely keep its meaning and intentions in another was kind of the end goal here. And so kind of an example of this was we tabled in an event, the Change of the World event a couple weeks ago, and we asked participants to describe the language that they were on, which was the Arizona Stadium. And that was the first obstacle, so people were kind of baffled by this question. How are you going to ask me what my relationship to the land we live on is like? So that was the first obstacle. The second obstacle was to describe it in the language that they want to display that in, whether it be in Urdu or Spanish or Japanese. I saw a couple of students write on a piece of paper and then crumple it up and then throw it away and then do it again and then do it again and then do it again. And this was kind of, we had participants at our table for about 5 to 10 minutes doing this. And we displayed it on this board, this poster board, and it showed everybody's all of the submissions that we received through this engagement. And with those engagements, I got people really thinking about translation and how there was kind of this commonality in understanding the land, regardless of language and regardless of culture, which I found really fascinating, with the use of language and seeing land as a living and breathing entity. That was kind of the end result of every response. And so some cool little tidbits that I want to share with you with this response was that 50% of our participants were ages 30 to 49. 20% were in the 50 to 60 range. 20% were in the 18 to 29 range. And as far as languages, obviously English was the prominent language with 54%. The next up was Spanish at 8% of our participants. And then the rest of the language ranged from Japanese, Italian, and Armenian, Hebrew, Latin, Urdu, and each one was about 4% contribution of the community poem. And so I wanted to kind of share with you what that, with everybody's responses and what that poem turned into. I'm going to kind of slightly translate some of the responses because we did get them in one language. We had to kind of see what they were saying, what that response was in English. But I'm going to go ahead and pass this around, and I'll kind of read the poem through for you guys as it's going around. All right, so this is the Landscapes of Languages. And I'm going to kind of cruise through some of the words I'm going to be a little wonky with. On this land trilogy, I chase the moon and trespass the night, question an ancient muddy river rarely there. I sing lullabies to the water and the faucet and the canals deep in the dark depth of soil to keep our dreams for the future alive. Always believe in your dreams. On this land, La Perla del Noche brilla, and the day's bright jewel sings. Within the landscapes of Hohokam land, I am humbled. We own our lives. Here I live an ordinary life full of wonder. Here, within the landscapes of the Hohokam land, I recognize myself in the desert creatures, plants, and animals, as if looking into a mirror. On this land, I am alone, floating untethered, until I plunge my pale arthritic hands wrist deep into the clay-laden dirt. Flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, smell of the soil. Within the lands of the Nueve land, I meditate with dormant and ancient volcanoes, opening the magma chamber of our sacred heartbeat. On this land, I live quickly, only chodo mate for a moment's rest. Live as life goes on slowly through each second. We are all born free as wayward wayfarers in a void of infinity. My tears are desert sand now. My eyes see palm trees. The student in the desert in the middle of a rain of sand. The desert is cruel. In this land there are palm trees where the wise man sings. My land, my lake, my sky, me equals land. The earth belongs to itself, I embrace it, and I find belonging. On Odom Jewett, I wish to honor my Hohokam and Anya Wari. Within the lands of the Hohokam land, landscapes of the Hohokam land, those who came before made place for so many more that could become those who have gone. Old native souls breathe. I reside on this land, far from the lands in concrete. A home is a place that has family and memories. A house is just a building you live in. When you can't go to your house, you can always go home. Within the landscapes of Ilura Kata Jutura National Park, land of the territory of I weep a mother's tears for those I never birthed. Within the landscapes of the Hohokam land, I am engaged, I am whole. I live with gratitude. On this land there is magic. I hear hummingbirds whisper, God, is this very earth you were born of? Is every ephemeral stream burst of blustery wintry air, creatures winged or terrestrial, and every proud mesquite, the land itself is God. I feel the distance from home, but the presence of myself. I feel shame and sadness through my ancestors who were not the ones to steal the land. I live in this land as a diaspora Armenian. I don't know much about representation of the working people who created me. On this land, we are not owners but stewards. Freely I contemplate the beauty of God's masterpiece. I will sing glory to God in the highest forever and ever. With the soil between fingers under cracked nails, I begin to feel how this place could be home. That is the Landscapes of Languages. Thank you. And so through this community poem, we've learned that language is far more complex than we assume. And so giving the opportunity for cultures of all walks of life to experience and understand history, politics, worldviews, perspectives, through doing this, we can nurture experiences and create bridges between individuals from different backgrounds. And so that was kind of what we wanted to do with the Landscapes of Languages. So over on this table right here, we do have, the submissions are still open. If you want to contribute to the Landscapes of Language poem, the prompt is over here. You fill out a piece of Post-it note and with your name and email on the back, and we'll include the Landscapes of Language poem on the website. And I believe that's it. My name is Chris, and thank you again.
So much. You can also submit online via the form I sent out. The QR code will go straight to it. So please consider submitting. All right. Asna Nusrat, she, her, is a bilingual writer from Karachi, Pakistan, pursuing an MFA in fiction at Arizona State University. She mostly writes fiction and nonfiction and has briefly experimented with translations as well. Her fiction mostly circles themes of parenting, marriage, disease, disability, debts, and objectophilia. Her nonfiction lays bare more blunt truths that often fuel her fiction stories as well. As an immigrant writer, she is still new to America and everything American. She sees all her days as living specimens of translation and continues to understand the craft of translations in Urdu and English, poetry and prose, as they reveal themselves in each language. Her translations have been published on the Thousand Languages website. Please join me in welcoming Asna.
Hi everyone, can you all hear me? I need to fix this a little bit more. Hi again. Thank you everyone for being here, for coming out and just listening to us talk about translations, and thank you Liminal for having us do this panel here, and thank you, Jackie, for that very, very generous introduction. So today I'm going to be reading from an essay that basically is about how translations to me are a form of violence, and how we contest that space of violence, and how we navigate that space. Okay, so here it is. My focus with translations has always been on interrogating the politics of translation and how we believe all languages are equal, but some more equal than others. Bear with me as I pick your brain about why the success of translations revolve around the locus of languages they are tethered to. I had always wondered why translators go through the trouble of digging in unfamiliar work by an author they have possibly never known and translate. The idea remained foreign to me until I became a specimen of translation myself upon moving to the US as a legal alien. For me, translations are more than just a creative exercise. In my case, I, the writer, am a parasite, and the texts I choose, the living being I cling to. I survive like this to incarnate a language that has been declared comatose or dead by and to the Western world, my language of home, Urdu. The reason I chose to start translating for 1,000 languages were selfish. It's neither that I consider myself an authority on Urdu, the language that I have translated works into, nor a seasoned reader of prose and poetry. My motivations were purely self-serving because it was important to me to put Urdu among the global languages that 1,000 languages has recognized. As a translator, I write so that I have something to show to my people back home, many of whom cannot comfortably read and understand literature in English, and to bring them closer to a world that they have never known. Undertaking this project was more than just writing translations for me. It meant that I erect a system that begins with me as the translator and connect with readers, reviewers, transcribers, typists, linguists, and editors across the US and Pakistan to work in collaboration. Establishing the system demanded more than I thought it would. Time, effort, phone calls, internet disruptions, writing, rewriting, and the trash can filling up so fast you won't believe it, new beginnings, teaching, learning, and more than anything, realizing that translations are probably the most political form of literary writing, especially when you're working with a language from the global south. Translations between Urdu and English are much like pushing a big body through a barbed pinhole, mincing words into something else as they transfer. This journey is especially arduous because it is done between languages so far apart that letters have died crossing the distance. Some sounds have gone extinct in the process, some meanings evolving into new inventions over the time it takes to travel from the left margin of the page to the right. And as I continue to talk about translations, you see me bringing in a theory of translation by Goranson and McSweeney. Their article, which is called Manifesto of the Disabled Text, was published in New Ohio Review. There is a quote from this article that captures the very essence of something that they term as compulsory able-bodiedness. And this is how that applies to translation. And I quote, "Compulsory able-bodiedness requires that translated texts function as docile bodies that reinforce dominant cultural norms of genred, raced, and classed bodily textual function." Some terms to note here: docile, dominant, raced, and classed. In another instance, they write, "Translation is the prosthetic that calls attention to its own unnaturalness." I have always seen the process of translation from Urdu to English as an abuse, an assault, a violence of sorts. When I use the language of violence, I don't refer to mindless, malicious violence like opening fire on innocents, but violence as endurance that builds something. I talk about how violence exists even as growth in the human body. Puberty, childbirth, the loss of virginity, aging, decaying, and death. These violent transformations that we celebrate as stages of life prove that even something that is necessary for growth is compliant with nature. With this logic, it becomes difficult to contest such violence. And similar to violence necessary for the growth and sustenance of the body, the act of translation too is violent at its core. In order to translate one word from Urdu, I have to break the bones of the alphabets, distort the sounds, manipulate the syllables, and rip apart the text to create a translation that fits the mold in English. We may challenge the notion of untranslatability all we want, and claim that everything can be translated, however unfaithful, undevoted, irregular, or unequal as it may be. But at least to me, translations will always be an exercise in violence. Torture, abuse, assault, even if there's something hopeful at the end. By this logic, all translators condone violence. That begs the question, why? Because there is a cause greater than the preservation of languages, which is a global education of languages. The fight that we're fighting here is not preserving languages, but fighting from them going extinct. This ties in with compulsory able-bodiedness that states that in order to be deemed normal or perfect or correct, your state of being must conform with the standards of normativity enforced by the system. So then do translated texts become able-bodied after undergoing a grueling process of translation? Or do the wounds never heal enough for them to be deemed able-bodied? I guess the answer is crickets chirping, because who knows? But naturally, there is a discomfort that follows, a nervousness. In Goranson and McSweeney's words, and I quote, "Such nervousness is already an admission that all is not as stable, with our bodies, ourselves, and texts, as we are led to believe we should believe." This anxiety is an admission that it's okay to sit with a translated text and run your finger over its textures, feel the jagged edges, let your tongue twist to produce foreign sounds, and recognize that the text, before everything, has lived a life in a different language once. And this is an approximation of the original that is stuck in a limbo between that and this, between English and Urdu. We allow our translations the grace to exist in that no man's land without interrogation, and celebrate the rough, blunt, dented body of translation standing on its own 2 feet, because as translators, we know better than anyone how many amputations and interventions it took for it to be where it is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Asna. Belén Agustina Sánchez, they, comes from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where she was a translator and children's and YA's literature editor. Currently, Belén is a PhD student in the Department of Spanish at Arizona State University. She translated the work of the anthropologist Eduardo Kahn, How Forests Think, and researches speculative fiction through the environmental humanities. She also serves as a Spanish language reviewer for 1,000 Languages Project. Please join me in welcoming Belén.
Hola. Hello, hello. Okay, first, thank you so much. I come from a place, a city, where this type of places abound, but not with this vibe, not with, I just asked the guys from Mask, and they were like, yeah, I'm gonna give it to you right now. And that kind of like generosity, dudes, you're like amazing, thank you. And I want to thank Jackie too, because she has the same spirit with us. I got here in 2019, and for me translation is also selfish, but not because I need Spanish to be around. Like Spanish can fend for himself, right? But it was me. I needed to exist. I needed to exist somewhere. And I needed to exist in the US, and I needed to have my name around, and translation allows you to do that. Allows you to like put yourself in the same breath as an author or a publishing house. So translators are a little bit like tricky sometimes. And we do work hard, but I think that translation is one of the activities that have, it still has some je ne sais quoi about it, like a spirit. You can do it, a translation, poetry translation, or a book translation, and people think like you, that you know something. They don't. But you're just like very, I don't know, brave, that's all. And what I wanted to share with you guys is that there's nothing worse for a translator than another translator. Sorry, guys. But the thing is that when you meet someone that translates, you are immediately thinking, oh my God, are they the kind of people that explains the text while they are translating? Are they the kind of people that amputates the text to make it fit, right? And you're like, how dare they? And like the thing is that we live in like metaphorical houses. When we translate, we choose the metaphor for us, and we are like, okay, I'm the bridge, or maybe I am the untranslatability, or maybe I am, I don't know, the quirky translator. You know, you choose a house, you choose a metaphor for yourself, and then comes the translator, and tries to like break down your house. They're like, no, that's wrong, that other thing that you did is wrong. So one of the ways I protect my metaphorical home as a translator, and that I also share with the people that bring me translation for the project, is to use something that I learned in Argentina with a very, very quirky translator, a poetry translator. And she told me about thinking about the poem as it was a music score. Yeah, I knew I was not gonna be able to do that. A music score, like, and every one of us are thinking about sounds, and all of us are thinking about music when we translate. So when I translate a poem, I try to think about what it sounds like. And I chose something to share with you. It was the first poem I had to translate, 2019, New Belén, fresh from Argentina, and I had to make a good impression. And I get a poem from a Polish author, and it was very hard. So I used all my tools. So I'm just gonna read you some verses, and then I'm gonna share with you what I was thinking about. So the poem is called Notes for a Non-Native Speaker. And I chose this because sometimes I feel like, what am I doing? English is not my first language, and I speak Argentinian Spanish. I'm probably like the farthest away from someone that people should like look for in a translator. So I chose this one because it was filled with meaning that for me was quite obscure. And now it's going to be obscure for you because you're going to hear it from me with my thick Argentinian accent. So it goes like this. It says, eat quietly in Krakow. Do not speak of the millions presumed missing, nor the millions more declared dead. Postmodernity, the relativity of madness. Cast iron doors swing open here, even when the store is closed. No open, says the proprietor, in defiance of the literal fact. Ascend to the top of the steeple, expecting to see the inside of the top of a steeple. What feature is a bell? Too heavy to be rung. The men are either barrel-chested or they are not. Either way, do not stare. At the weeping wall, I wept profusely. At the old synagogue, now a museum, I grew pale. Disconsolate, I sang Pie Jesu to a crowd of one in the rain. So, yeah, right, like what? Krakow, Poland. I don't know anything about Poland. I don't know anything about cast iron doors. I don't know anything about barrel-chested men. I don't know what a steeple is. I have no idea. But I know that Virginia Conchan, who is the author, Virginia Conchan, if you want to look her up, she's awesome. I know that she's talking about the Holocaust. I know that she's talking about the Jewish ghetto. I know that she's talking about a particular period in history. But I know that she's talking about a lot of other things that I'm not going to catch. But I have to make the translation because I'm in the US and I need to be someone and I needed extra credit for my PhD. So I remember my translation teacher back in Argentina. She used to read poems like, the word for death in Spanish is muerte. She would say muerte each time she would read like a poem. So that you would think about that and that right? So eat quietly in Krakow. That's hard. And I wanted to make that sound show up again. So that's the whole point. When I was translating to Spanish, I was picking out words that would have R's, that would have C's, I was doing all that. So I was saying come rápido en Cracovia. And then when the no open showed up, I would say, instead of cerrado, which would be closed, I would say no abierto, which is something that sounds a little bit similar to the English no open. So all these type of choices come from the idea that Walter Benjamin was right about the spirit, the echo of a poem, the echo of a text, and the translation job to be just to bring that echo, that music, that vibe into the translation. So it's that, and it also has to do with the ostranenie, the estrangement, right? Our Russian formalist that I love so much. Like, we need to make the poem weird, and everything we put in it has to build towards that feeling, that echo. Because in the poem there's something weird going on. The author is going to a tower, and there's a bell, but the bell is shh. And you're gonna see people, but don't look. And you're gonna, the door is gonna open, but don't go, you know? So all of that I started feeling in the poem, I had to make it appear again in my translation. And that's what understanding the poem as a musical score means for me. It's like the keys, right? It's not word for word. But I agree, translation is violent, and you have to defend your violent choices. And sometimes your poem ends up being weird or ends up being grammatically incorrect, and you have to defend that. So that's what I try to share with the people I help in the project, in the 1,000 Languages project, because now I'm a reviewer, so look at me. 2019, 2023, the glow up. So I want to thank Jackie for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. It was huge.
to use what I learned, and I'm going to keep learning, and thank you for your generosity and for listening to me. Thank you so much, and thank you guys.
Thanks so much, Belén. For our last presentation, I will introduce our final presenter. Zhongxing Zeng is a PhD literature student in the English department at Arizona State University. His research interests include William Blake, English Romanticism, and English-Chinese literary translation. He is also a singer-songwriter with publications of original music on NetEase Music, Apple Music, and Spotify. He has translated a number of pieces for 1,000 Languages and also serves as a Chinese language reviewer for us. Please welcome Zhongxing.
Hey. Hi everyone, my name is Zhongxing. Tonight I want to share a song adaptation I wrote and published recently. The name of the song is called The Tulips. It is based on a flash fiction that was named When You Are Old and I Am Gray, which is published in ASU's Hayden's Fair Review. And I have been a translator in the Thousand Languages project for about a year, and in the fall semester last year, I was translating this piece, this flash fiction from English to Chinese, and in the process, I found some really interesting lyrical and also musical qualities within the original text. So I select some lines and rearrange into the lyrics in a verse chorus song structure. And after some experimentation with different combinations of words and melodies, I came up with this final version. So I'll just play and sing it.
Zhongxing, I'll let him de-equip the equipment. Okay, well, I'll start off with a few questions for our panelists, maybe just one, depending on if you all have questions too. I want to be respectful of your time. And then that'll be our event for today. But maybe one more hand for everyone who's presented. I'm really thrilled for all of their excellent work. I'm gonna do this. And I'm gonna do this. And we'll see. Hi. Okay, thank you so much everyone for presenting. I think we'll start off with just maybe a question that kind of encapsulates a lot of what you've been working on in relation to sound. I feel like so much of what you've been talking about has to do with sound, and when it comes to literary translation specifically, and also thinking about poetry, we're thinking not just about content, but about sound. And you've spoken a bit about translation, breaking the bones of the alphabet, capturing an echo, or even literalizing the music within language through song. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about process when it comes to sound. At what point within translation are you working with sound at the start, midway, simultaneous with meaning? And feel free to respond to any part of that question or elaborate. And then Chris, if you want to jump into, you're welcome to, and thinking about the choices you made for creating these patchwork poems in the poem. Can you take this? Yeah, sound, yeah. And maybe why pick this piece, like, that you did?
Just writing. I don't know where I read it before. Just like the meaning of the words transfer. Not sure, but the emotion of the words are usually conveyed by the sound. So when I was doing the translation, it's kind of a semantic satiation process. You have to do really intense repetitions. You have to go over again to translate, not just one or two times. So this kind of repetition gives me a lot of just kind of left my attention to more about the sound features in the original text. And for this piece I'm translating, I'm actually I don't really see this piece as a flash fiction or a short story. It's really lyrical, and if you read the original text, you can find really conversational and also at the same time really repetitive patterns in the text, and it has some kind of inspirations in my head, so I try some rhythmic patterns and to apply them to try to sing the text alongside the melodies with my guitar, and sometimes it works. It has this kind of magical moments.
I can also briefly talk about sound and how I access sound in the pieces I translate. So the acoustic quality of writing is something that I look for in my own writing as well as in pieces that I translate. And I do not write poetry, I'm not a poet. So please do not confuse this with spoken word poetry. But that said, I feel like sounds and allowing text to have that sonic quality is really important, because it allows the text to kind of lift from the page and appear full-bodied in front of you. It's not just you reading text on the page, it's you hearing those very words that you're reading on the page in your mind and then producing those sounds. So it's an inward and outward sensory experience, which for me is what makes it very enriched. So sounds are really, really important. And the piece, there was one particular prose poem by Katie Ferris by the title of Politics of Metamorphosis that I was translated for 1,000 languages. And beautiful piece, by the way, you should go and read it. So that piece particularly had a really unique relationship with sound. And when I say that, I am going to quote a line from it. Okay, so this was the very last line of Katie Ferris's prose poem. It said, "It is clear," she reminds herself, "that a bone is a bone no matter where it's found." So when I read the phrase that a bone is a bone, it kind of created that hollowed out effect in my mind, something that made me echo in my own mind the sound of an O being repeated that way, followed by the sound of a B. So that alliteration was something that stuck. And when I was translating it into Urdu, it was not easy, obviously, because after hearing what I've said about violence and translations, you'd know that it is not that easily transferable. But what I could find to be the closest approximate to that was, okay, वो अपने आप से दोहराती है कि एक मुर्दा ढांचा मुर्दार ही रहेगा बेशक जहाँ से भी नमूदार हुआ हो. So मुर्दा, मुर्दार and नमूदार. Even if you do not know Urdu, you'd be able to tell that these are sounds that are repeating. And this was my way of encapsulating a bone is a bone. So that's why I think I would always try to preserve the sonic quality of pieces that I'm translating, even if I'm not able to be exact in my translation of the meaning.
Yeah. What she said. No, yes. And the prettiest of the Russian formalists, Yuri Chinyanov, it was very handsome. He says that the poem is like a machine, right? So the alliterations would work like pieces of that machine, and that in the way that prose can add some words that are not like, well, people, sorry. But if you write fiction, you will say, no, you cannot put any word, no. But the poem has this thing that is very short, it has to have an impact, and when you are reading a poem, you reread it, and you reread it, and you're all the time like going again to see what you missed, right? I translated notes for a non-native speaker like in 2019, and I was still finding things this afternoon. So the poem has that quality, and the alliteration, the repetition, all the resources that poetry has have to do with sound and have to do with, again, estrangement. So bone, how was the word? A bone is a bone. It's a weird way to think about bones, because you're expecting a definition and you are not getting it. You're getting a bone is a bone, like a rose is a rose is a rose. So you have to think about what she's trying to say. So that estrangement, that ostranenie, is what you have to try to recapture, and the best way to do it is to keep playing with alliterations, or maybe just make a Spanish word sound weird, or an Urdu word sound weird, like different, strange. And I think that's where it comes from. This idea of the poem as a machine, and this idea, this other thing that I think we are all like doing, and I was thinking about that when you were explaining. There's this Freudian, if there's a psychologist here, I'm sorry, but there's this concept of floating listening. Is that the term? Like your therapist is listening to you, but he's not really listening to you. He's listening the repetitions, and he's listening like the way you put the things. It's the same thing. So if a poem can be translated into a song, into notes, into a spirit, into echoes, it's because we're not listening, but we are like floating while we're listening, or we see the poem as something that is floating, and that at some points we pick up like elements of it. And I think that would be like the idea too.
In terms of sound, this was actually my first semester doing the Thousand Languages project, I really didn't go too far deep into translation, but I did go, and I saw through the community poem. There was a specific line, I think we were talking, Jackie and I were looking at the poem a week or two ago, and we were, there was a line, carne de carne, and we were kind of, it was
Flesh.
meat, yeah,
Flesh of my flesh.
exactly, and we kind of were like meat of my meat, you know? But then I kind of threw in flesh my flesh because I instantly thought of, I just finished Tender of the Flesh, a novel, yeah, and it was a great book. And so the word flesh jumped out at me, and I thought, okay, that's, that sounds better. I mean, flesh of my flesh sounds so much better. And I asked a Spanish-speaking friend about it, and she was saying, that could go really either way, but poetically that sounds better. And so I thought that was really interesting. I really am curious to see where sound goes, because I think it's, I'm actually kind of, after this semester with Thousand Languages Project, I actually took it upon myself. I didn't formally take any classes in poetry, but I started studying a lot of Mary Oliver and studying her theory on sound right now. So I think this is funny. It's kind of like coming into full circle. So, but yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Translation related, project related, curiosities? Oh, maybe we'll go here and then over here.
Well, this is the most enjoyable panel I've had so far, so I just really appreciate all of the beautiful things. I have no idea about translation, and I only speak one language. However, I am writing a play, and I'm noticing that relationships, even just between each other, is a type of translating what the other person means. Interesting what you're saying about psychology and that floating listening. How can I think as a translator when I'm trying to work on my characterization of understanding what the other person is trying to say? If I'm writing a nonfiction piece of, about other people, if that makes sense.
Applying translation techniques to like character development and like, yeah. Are you thinking like dialogue between characters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any insight?
It was really long.
I gotta stand up, I'm sorry. I think with plays, his writing screenplays is the same thing. One of my favorite screenwriters is Noah Baumbach, and he does this thing in his screenplays where he does dual dialogue, where they dance. It's back and forth. But in film, they're talking over each other. And in Navajo, there's, I think, in languages, across cultures, across just humans, there's a universality in how people talk to each other. But in Navajo, it sounds like we're fighting. I mean, when we talk to each other, it's very, very brunt, way of speaking. And or just very like a gnashy kind of thing. And I think people notice that, and I think people think we're aggressive. But I don't think that's the case. But I don't know, for me, that incorporating the Navajo language into a screenplay and into a play was one of the hardest things ever, because you're going to get the scholars and you're going to get the people who speak it and don't write it are going to judge it. And it's like that thing you said earlier, people are going to go after you for how you're going to say something. But it's really, if you're in your metaphorical house, you have your language, your universal language within that house, I think. And I think if you abide by that, and that's your Bible, that's, it's like that here in translation, right? You want to defend your translation. You want to defend the way your characters talk to each other. I think that's, at least that's for me, writing and nonfiction.
So I've never written plays myself, but as a fiction writer, I often have to write dialogue. And for the longest time, that was the part of writing that I was most scared of, because I never felt like my dialogue read off the page as organic, as real human beings talking. And then a sweet friend of mine gave me an advice that write dialogue the way that you eavesdrop on people's conversations. So they don't have to be full thoughts. They just have to be bits and pieces enough for whoever is reading it to know what is being talked about. That said, I was once writing a short story in which a male character had a speech disability, in which the character's speech was slurred and often not having enough pauses. So the way we pause when we say each word in a sentence, that person was not able to do that because of a disability. So the way that I played with language in that was that I removed the spaces between words when I was writing out the dialogue. That helped the reader feel that there is A, some disability happening here, and B, get that cumulative effect of a word vomit of sorts coming out on the page. So that is one way you can play with language, because language is malleable. You can fine tune it the way you want. And when you're talking about character development for different kinds of characters, even if the characters are speaking the same language, let's say English, each person has a different way of speaking in English. So just giving them each a really unique phrase, which in Urdu there's a term for it that's called katya kalam, and that phrase refers to a phrase that people are keen on repeating often. So you know what I mean? You know what I mean? That might be a phrase that some character might be repeating. So in that way, if you give each character a distinctive quality, that way you'd be able to discern between their own languages, even in the same script.
Thanks, Asna. I'm also just thinking about, and I don't translate, I'm a poet, write dialogue and in stories or plays, like that's the space where conflict happens. So there's inevitably like misunderstandings happening as a result, also influenced by like characters' motivations. Thank you for the question. There was a question over here.
I just wanted to know how often you get to consult with the authors of these pieces, just because I know that like the nature of art is it impresses everyone differently, a little bit so. And so is there ever a time where you consult with an author and they're like, well, I'm hearing this and you know these qualities, and they're like, no, I think this is more important and like this was my intention.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have a juicy piece of gossip about that.
Yes.
No, so like being the translator, as I was saying, it's like a privileged position in the sense that you get to put your name next to the author. That sometimes comes free and that sometimes doesn't, because it's such a liminal space, because you are like doing it sometimes for free. So in the case of our project, most of the authors, I had to reach out only to ask for permission to publish, just for the, how is it called? Release it? No.
Oh yeah, like a
publication
on the Asna.
So they had to say, yeah, you can publish it, and they were happy that their poem was being distributed and put back to life. And I didn't get any email or anything saying what have you done with my poem. But then you have people. Then I was paid to translate a book, and the guy was on my case, word after word after word. And it was a very poetic text, even when it was an anthropology book. And the guy was very interested in that things were his way, which was very like, it was for me it was very hurtful, and I really like, it was bad, you know. But in that moment I was making money. So that's what happens in this kind of situations. I would love to, and I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna email like Virginia, and I'm gonna say, what were you talking about? Because I need context. And I might do it, and she might respond very nicely, or she might say, no, figure it out, or you know. But I think that we don't have to forget that it's a practice and the materialism of it. You know, like it's a situated practice. And it's not the same to be an Argentinian translator than a Spanish from Spain translator, or to be a student than to be like already a doctor, or you know, that also is, that's important, I think. That's my experience with that.
Anyone else like to say? You good? I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
when you translate, is there a hierarchy of importance when it comes to what aspects of translation you consider? For example, let's say when you're talking about the sound quality of a translation, if you have a translation that has a better acoustic quality that matches the original text but slightly distorts the meaning, what's more important and how do you balance those different aspects of translation when you're doing your work?
It's always hard. Process is hard. It's kind of like a dynamic balance you have to maintain that between the sound features and also the semantic features. And also, especially in poetry translation, you have to pay a lot of attention to the original author's line arrangement in German, and also the stanza arrangement. You have to take everything into consideration, but it's always hard. You can, for me, translation, poetry translation is like a painting. You don't have to paint for example, paint the rose. You don't have to paint. Your translation is just another petal of the rose. You don't have to paint the whole rose. And every translation alongside the original text come together to form the rose. And that's my concept.
I think one thing to note with translations is that something is going to be lost. And it's upon the translator, I believe, to make that choice for what are they okay with losing in their translation, be it the acoustic quality, be it the exact meaning, that exactness that we aspire to reach, or the length. In terms of poems, many translators are conflicted with whether or not to keep the size of the lines the same, number of lines in each stanza the same. So there's a lot to consider over there. And I think in that, it just comes down to you. What did you read in that poem or in that prose that stuck with you that you want to now translate into your writing? And I would echo what Belén was saying earlier about estrangement and about making the target language weird enough to communicate to the reader that something is missing or something is amiss here, so that they know that this is not going to be, never going to be the exact replica of the original. It is a transference of sorts. So yeah.
I think that's a good stopping point. Before I let you go, I just want to encourage you, if you'd like to submit to the community poem, please do so over there, or you can send in, I'd say within the next week, online. And then please come up. We have some postcards for you to take. If you'd like some stickers, feel welcome to grab some and chat with our presenters. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate being here. And one more hand for all our wonderful presenters. Thank you.